Good afternoon and welcome to a webinar that CFP Board is sponsoring that will be covering the guide to CFP Board's technology standard. This is a resource that CFP Board issued recently that addresses the technology standard in CFP Board's Code of Ethics and Standards of Conduct that provides a guide to that standard as well as sample questionnaires and technology evaluation checklist. I'm pleased today to be presenting this webinar with Jonathan Black, the Assistant General Counsel at CFP Board. My name is Rydzewski. I'm CFP Board's General Counsel, and we have three very special guests with us today. Matt Schulte, the Head of Financial Planning at eMoney. Patrick Spenser, the Managing Director of Moneytree Software. And Dain Runestad, the Senior Vice President and Head of Product at RightCapital, will be sharing their experiences with this technology guide and offering you some points to be thinking about as you review this resource and think about how you're considering the technology that you're using in providing financial advice to clients. So today we're going to cover several things. We will talk about the technology standard itself and explain the language of the standard and what it means and how you should be considering that in the work that you're doing. We'll give an overview of the guide itself, as well as the sample questionnaires and the checklist. The sample questionnaires include more than 200 questions that were carefully drafted to help you in thinking about the technology needs that you have, evaluating your tech stack, thinking through the features and capabilities that are important to you and important to your clients as you're providing services to them. We also will spend time talking about a checklist that you can use in thinking about your own current existing technology stack. So this guide that we put together covering the technology standard is another document that CFP Board has developed and issued to provide guidance to CFP professionals on the application of the code and standards to their practice. This is a core business function of CFP Board. We have as an organizational goal a strong desire to provide you with resources that can help you serve your clients in their best interest according to the Code of Ethics and Standards of Conduct. We now have over 35 case studies and 15 guides that cover a wide variety of materials, some of which you can see on the screen here. Last year, we put together a guide to CFP Board standards with respect to financial advice about cryptocurrencies and other financial assets whose value is tied to cryptocurrencies. We have a guide that addresses the process a CFP professional may use to satisfy the duty of care when providing financial advice that does not require financial planning. Another guide to the financial planning process itself. This one really illustrates how a CFP professional might provide financial planning to a client in accordance with the code and standards. We have guides on managing conflicts. We know that some CFP professionals get their start in a call center. We have a guide to help CFP professionals who are working in call centers to determine how to comply with the code and standards. Many CFP professionals are fee only. As you know, they have conflicts too. We developed a fee-only guide to provide those professionals with the guidance they need to continue working on a fee-only basis and stay in compliance with the code and standards. In addition, the more than 35 case studies that we've discussed are ways that we can provide practical guidance to CFP professionals and their firms on the code and standards using hypothetical factual circumstances, asking a question about the duty that arises in that circumstance under the code and standards, by providing response options, identifying the best response, and then explaining why one response is better than the other. So we have a lot of these, but some examples of how we've applied these case studies. We've taken a look at applying the fiduciary duty to a rollover recommendation, to an opinion about a financial asset. Some CFP professionals work in teams, and so there's issues that arise there, including communications about team member responsibilities. what to do when a client exhibits a sign of lack capacity or of undue influence, issues like A share class recommendations and duties that apply when you're thinking about those. We know that conflicts are very important, so we have case studies that address topics like recommending a product that is issued by an affiliate or managing conflicts arising from different product recommendations. And of course, we do have sample engagement letters, compliance checklists, and nearly 25 pages of FAQs and answers. All of these materials are available at cfp.net. We encourage you to go to CFP Board's website, take a look at the resources that we have available, determining which ones apply most to your practice, and then reviewing those materials as you're thinking about the services that you're providing to your clients.
Thanks, Leo. So before turning to the technology standard, I'm Jonathan Black, Assistant General Counsel here at CFP Board, and I'd like to address briefly a topic at the top of all your minds, CE credit. We're tracking attendance and we'll be automatically providing CE credit for those attending today. So there's nothing you need to do on your end. We'll be addressing that after the webinar. Now, with that out of the way, I want to dig into CFP Board's technology standard. It's captured in standard A14 in the Code of Ethics and Standards of Conduct. It's a principles-based standard that sets out a CFP professional's duties when selecting, using, recommending technology. Now, being a principles-based standard, it refers to a reasonable care and judgment, a reasonable level of understanding, and a reasonable basis for believing. Now, this naturally leads to the question of what is reasonable. It's for that reason, as you'll see on the next slide, CFP Board developed two valuable documents to help all of you with their technology. First, the technology guide, and second, a collection of sample questionnaires and a technology evaluation checklist. Now, all of these materials are designed to help you comply with the technology standard, but more specifically to simply help you better use, select, recommend technology when working with your clients. It's important to note these materials don't dictate one right way to select or use your technology. That depends on your clients and your business. Instead, they provide important and helpful considerations concerning your interactions with your technology. So starting with the technology guide, it's a resource you can use when selecting, using, recommending technology. Its considerations apply to advanced AI tools, but do not directly address the separate topic of information security. Importantly, the guide details 6 key considerations for satisfying the technology standard, which our industry panelists will discuss in turn. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Patrick Spenser to start.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and it's an honor to be part of this webinar and even more to have been part of this committee. I hope that the attendees will take time to look at this guide and sample questionnaire. In my opinion, it is a game changer for the CFPs that utilize this tool, understanding the growth and just the overall technology scene is becoming more and more comprehensive, but yet more and more involved for you as well. Again, my name is Patrick Spenser. I'm Managing Director for Moneytree. I've been there since 2020. I've got about 23 years in the technology space. A lot of that's about 16 years working with business-to-business, software as a service in fintech. And then I've got about 12 years in commercial banking. Now, Moneytree is actually around 40 years old, actually about 43 years old as a financial planning provider in the space. We're actually getting ready to launch our next generation platform in Q3 of this year. And a lot of our clients are you. We have advisors with certifications like the CFP that believe comprehensive planning is most prudent and that really want to deepen client engagements to grow relationships utilizing financial planning. So with that said, let's take a look at the first key consideration. Reasonably understand the technology platform and how each component is used to provide professional services. So if we take a look at the next slide, this slide is from 2018 and was developed by Kitsis.com, and it's Advisor Tech Map. And it shows you about 31 different categories and then dozens of software solutions. And this is your technology platform, or what I might refer to as a tech stack. Now, as you take a look at the next slide of April or of 2024, again from Kitsis.com, you'll see that there's now about 36 categories and even more software solutions. And so what we're seeing, as you can imagine in this space, is that it's quite a lot to take on. It can be very overwhelming. And if an advisor is not careful, he or she can create tech bloat and sometimes look for that shiny object that maybe everyone is kind of driving towards or looking at. But you got to take time to discern if the technology you're reviewing is the right technology for you. Also, history shows that advisors can use anywhere from 8 to 15 different software applications. That's a lot to manage, especially for smaller firms. That includes your CRM, your financial planning, portfolio management, risk tolerance, and compliance, as well as your broker-dealer systems and platforms. And so the list goes on and on. So what's going on in the industry is you have everything from advisors and entrepreneurs wanting to build their own products based on their experience to venture capital and private equity firms targeting opportunities they see in the marketplace with startups and with acquisitions. So there's a lot going on. And having a single resource to try to cut through some of the noise will really allow you to be successful with your tech stack. And also keep in mind that history has shown that generally software utilization, so how much of the software application you're actually using, is around 45 to 55%. Meaning you have unused and undiscovered features sitting in your software applications today. So make sure that before you buy, you don't already have a tool that can do what you're looking for. Even if it can't do everything in that one particular function, can it do enough without having to buy one more software application? So let's take a look at an example from the guide itself on the next slide. Understand the technology platform. So you'll have these sections within the guide that will help break down what the targeted section is about. And so if we take a look at the next slide, we're going to focus in on what we mean by understanding the technology platform. So technology itself does not replace your expertise. And this includes AI, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. I'm sure we'll have some questions around that. But the technology should also correlate with your expertise as well as your business goals. It should also enable growth, productivity, and enhance that client experience so that you can engage that client deeper and broader based upon their lifestyle objectives. Now, the technology platform, as we just discussed, tech bloat is real. So you want to understand your flow. And flow can be across data, process, and advice. And when it comes to the data piece, we're talking about where is the data aggregated, where is it integrated, in what system or record is the information that you're trying to glean, where is that located? Where should the information be pushed to, and where can it be held where you have easy access to it? Whether it's a CRM system, whether it's financial planning, portfolio management, risk tolerance, all of those solutions come into play, but understand how should that data flow in your process. And that's the next flow that we want to talk about. Across sales, operations, compliance, and administration, exactly what is your process? What does that process look like? If you're a larger firm where you have folks that are in the field, you have operations, compliance, administration, again, make sure you understand where does the client process come into play. And then finally, that advice flow or that advice engagement. So trying to decide the client experience, the prep, the discovery, the proposal, the review, how do those take place? What is the level of communication? What type of communication are you having? Is it more digital? Is it virtual? Is it in person? And so you want the technology to match your flow, realizing as many as advisors that are on here, there's a lot of different types of workflows across data, process, and advice. So really want you to key in on that. And then finally, information security, which will also be covered a little bit later in more detail. Just reasonable steps to protect client data. And we'll talk a little bit about this later. Now, on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the proficiency and how you're actually going to utilize the solution itself. And how are you going to stay up to date with understanding what the system can do? And this is where we advise you take advantage of getting annual demos from your providers. Again, this is going to take time, but this investment can be worth it if you're trying to move from that 45 to 55% utilization to a higher level. Utilize client support, technical user groups, peer networks, forums and message boards, whether it might be from a broker dealer, from your firm, from a trade association, or from a network that you might be a part of. So utilize these groups, utilize this access to grow your proficiency, grow from that 45 and 55% utilization to 65, 75%, and really try to see what lift that provides you in efficiency and client engagement and possibly lowering your business costs. So let's take a look at the next key consideration, and that's monitor and assess the technology platform for any issues or gaps that would prevent the CFP professional from acting in the client's best interest. All right, so let's take a look at a section from the guide, monitoring the technology platform. And what you'll see in here is it really is referring to identifying issues or gaps that prevent you from delivering the best service. It provides relevant input and tips regarding this particular consideration. So let's take a look at some ideas and thoughts to help you with this. And part of this is on the partner side. So as we take a look at the next slide, you really want within your tech stack, providers should be partners that care and want to understand your business. So when you're asking for those annual demos or you're getting the release notes and you have questions, that there's a level of engagement that you feel like, okay, they've got my back. They've got my back. But in addition to that, there's a lot that falls onto you because you are the holder and the owner, the licensee of that software. So under your responsibility, read your product release notes. I know my colleagues on here, we wish the release notes as we publish them would have a much higher click-through rate with people reading what we're actually adding and enhancing to the solution. Apply your updates just like you do on your cell phone. Apply your updates, protect yourself and your client data. And it's good to have a procedure for applying and testing those updates so it gets done on that routine basis and you're not caught off guard without something being patched correctly. And also when using your applications, keep an ongoing list of what you need it to do, what maybe it doesn't do, so that when you are doing those annual demos to get updated or you're talking with a peer network or with a message board, you have a list of those things that you've been engaged in the solution, you've used it, but it's just not doing what you need it to do. Having that list readily available will really help you in the conversations and help you, again, move forward in those things that you're looking for that solution to do. And then finally, also ask your clients about their perception of the technology that touches them. This is very important to enhance that client experience. We can do a lot from a technology perspective. You can do a lot in terms of a CFP and an advisor, but really getting that client feedback is good. And it shows them that you care about what you're trying to put in front of them. It shows them that you care about the relevant information that they're getting, how they're getting it, how it can be consumed, and that feedback is very helpful for you. So that's it for the first two key considerations. Next up is Matt, and he will cover the next two. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. So my name is Matt Schulte. I am the head of financial planning at eMoney Advisor, and I oversee all things financial planning related there. I've been with eMoney for almost 24 years at this point. Last of the original 7 of us who were there day one back in 2000. So I've seen a little bit of everything over the years, and I have the privilege of taking care of the next 2 key considerations. Starting with number 3, which states, if you are responsible for selecting technologies or vendors, conduct appropriate due diligence. As it says here, if you're tasked with exploring a new component of your tech stack, Proper due diligence is a really critical process to making sure you don't end up with buyer's remorse. The costs associated with unwinding a poor technology choice are not, just about the money and the lost time associated with correcting that choice, but the costs could include things like the loss of data, damaged client relationships, or even security breaches. And these costs can be magnified even further when you're making the buying decision for others that you work with. So if we go to the next slide, we can see the screen capture from the guide around vendor due diligence. And as both a CFP professional and a technology provider, I've been able to appreciate this key consideration from both sides of the equation. And what's really important here, I think, is to make sure you do the appropriate due diligence on both the technology and on the vendor. I've been witness far too often to folks being unsatisfied at the end of the day because their focus was on one or the other and not both. I think the CFP board has done a tremendous job with the sample questionnaires and evaluation checklist we're going to go through a little bit later. And in particular, the questionnaires to this section of the guide on vendor and technology due diligence, they're really good, not just because the sample questionnaire is exhaustive in its completeness, but because it's an artifact that can be easily pulled out of the drawer and referenced when the time comes. And it's going to help provide a level of consistency and repeatability in your due diligence, even if it's been a significant amount of time since you last referenced it. Oftentimes, the CFP professional relies on their firm's selection of technology, or maybe even the services of a tech consultant. And that's okay. The guide states, if you, the CFP professional, have a reasonable basis to believe that the firm or consultant conducted appropriate due diligence to determine that that software provides reliable, objective, and appropriate outcomes. But what I've observed over the years is that oftentimes larger firms and tech consultants have a very elaborate and extensive due diligence process that more than satisfies the tech standard. But let me describe a scenario where I think there could be reason to examine the due diligence that was undertaken. So for instance, if you as a CFP professional join a new firm and that firm provides you with some homegrown proprietary software, I think that's an example that you as a CFP professional should examine. And why I say that is homegrown technology oftentimes is built, not just in a couple of years, but over a decade or more. And so first, you should examine the calculations and results that rely on updated legislation or tax changes. Secondly, you should really assess whether the software is current with modern data, privacy, quality assurance, and even user experience standards. This, I think, makes it incumbent on the CFP professional to question this scenario a bit deeper, whether you can reasonably believe that that technology produces reliable, objective, and appropriate outcomes. If we move to the next slide, we now move to the fourth consideration that we wanted to call out in satisfying the technology standard. And number 4 reads, have the relevant knowledge and skill to use the technology when providing professional services to a client. This is maybe the most straightforward of the 6 key considerations we're walking through this afternoon. If we move to the next slide, this consideration also states that a CFP professional must have the appropriate knowledge and skill to use their technology. And this includes understanding how to properly use applicable features, as well as the technology's output in the context it's used. As I think you would imagine, one of the most important things to do in order to satisfy this aspect of the technology standard is to avail yourself of the various training offerings that are associated with any new technology you're looking to adopt. These days, software training comes in many different flavors. in order to satisfy advisors' different learning styles and preferences. Guided virtual trainings are very common, as I'm sure you all know. Some technology vendors provide for the option of in-person training, which is really great and allows for a robust ability for a live Q&A that other settings just can't really allow for. And oftentimes, some form of training is also embedded inside the technology itself. So this works well for those who prefer to consume training in more bite-sized pieces, as it's often delivered in 5 or 10-minute recorded video sessions that, when you combine them all together, replicate a more comprehensive training. Another important aspect of training is to revisit it on some kind of frequency. A great way to do this is take advantage of any either homegrown trainings available by experts in your firm or with your home office. And this will help assure you kind of continue to maintain that level of proficiency that's important to getting the most out of your choices. I did want to mention one other item as we think about satisfying a proficiency level. As everyone knows, technology is evolving at an incredibly fast pace, and correspondingly, the enhancements, the new reporting, bug fixes, new integrations are added into various technologies all the time. And as a technology vendor, one of our biggest struggles is what Patrick mentioned earlier, and I'm going to spend just a moment on. Pay attention and review those release notes. These are communications that are sent out to users, providing an overview of the most recent changes to the technology. These release notes are oftentimes delivered via email, and advisors might quickly discard them as unimportant or an attempt to upsell, or they get stuck in junk and spam folders. I know I'm biased here, but these communications are very important to staying informed and educated as a user. I can't tell you the number of times we get questions from advisors about when we will be adding this new capability or this new integration. And, we unfortunately have to say, yeah, that was done 18 months ago. So like I said, pay attention for, software release notes from your technology provider. They're really helpful in kind of staying current. So that brings my 2 topics to a close, and I'll hand it off to, I think, Dain, who is next.
Hi, this is Dain Runestad. I lead the product team at RightCapital. I've been part of RightCapital since our launch in 2015. And as part of the continuing development and enhancement of RightCapital's comprehensive financial planning tools, I speak and hear from a lot of financial advisors about their challenges in selecting and understanding software tools. So it's been really exciting to see the guide and the sample questionnaires that the CFP board has put together to help advisors address the right technology topics in an easy to read way. It really is a must read for all CFP professionals and will definitely help advance the work that you all do for your clients. I get to do the 5th key consideration here, which is know which assumptions are embedded in the technology and whether those assumptions are appropriate. And as you'll see a little on the next slide, this consideration reflects the need to understand the assumptions that go into the software and how those are used. This includes which items are included and, almost as importantly, which items are not included. It also highlights the need to share and discuss assumptions with your client, which I think is a really important point. It's critical to ensure that the assumptions that are used in the software are aligned with your client's understanding and their expectations. As an example, think about Social Security. As you know, clients, especially those who are not yet approaching retirement age, have heard a lot of different things about the future of Social Security and what sort of benefits they may or may not receive. So it's important to understand, when you're doing, for example, a retirement projection, what Social Security benefits are being included in that software's projection, and ensure that that approach is in sync with what the client is expecting. In general, around expectations, we often suggest to firms and planners but they have some flexibility around adjusting those assumptions so that you and your clients can be aligned in the approach that's being taken to doing financial planning. The sixth consideration is to review the reliability, accuracy, and objectivity of the technology's outcomes against the client's information and underlying assumptions. The next slide shows that this consideration highlights the need to use your professional judgment to evaluate outcomes and ensure that they meet expectations. This is a key point that's brought up in the discussion in the guide surrounding automation bias and not just blindly accepting results. If you enter a bunch of numbers, push a button, and it comes up with some information to present to your client, that's great, but you need to understand why that information has been generated and what that represents. We think it's very valuable in that regard to get extremely comfortable with the software that you're using so that you understand how not only to generate a specific result, but to show different options and alternatives. This will allow you to be confident in the recommendations that you make and help explain why they are the right recommendations for your client's circumstances. You may even find it beneficial to walk clients through those different options so that they can see the why behind the recommendation and potentially help evaluate those different alternatives and make sure, again, that the assumptions that they're making are in line with what you were using when providing that information.
Thank you, Dain. So now we're going to turn to the sample questionnaires and technology evaluation checklist. There are 4 sample questionnaires, each covering a different topic. They contain over 250 useful and vetted questions to consider and ask vendors when conducting due diligence. Meanwhile, the technology evaluation checklist provides helpful considerations when evaluating your technology. Importantly, these materials are solely designed as a helpful resource for CFP professionals. You're not required to ask every question or consider each issue identified in these materials. Not every question will be appropriate for you or your client's needs. These provide a helpful starting point with your inquiry depending on your and your client's circumstances and needs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Leo to introduce the 4 sample questionnaires.
So if you haven't seen these yet, I really encourage you to go to our website, cfp.net, and go to the area where the compliance resources are located and find the sample questionnaires and technology evaluation checklist, because these are full of well thought out questions that are detailed, specific, actionable, and highly useful to you in thinking about technology and how you might use technology to work with your clients. It took CFP Board and a group of volunteers who work both on CFP Board's Standards Resource Commission, which is the standing body that helps CFP Board develop the guidance resources, as well as a working group composed of, in addition to the 3 individuals who are participating on this call today, others who have a background in technology to help think through what are the questions that a CFP professional is going to want to think about in evaluating technology. So we broke them down into 4 different areas. First are the core financial planning technologies. In this area alone, we have more than 100 different questions that cover a wide variety of topics. Primarily, this addresses the features and functionality of some of the most widely used categories of technology that you'll come across. And as you review the questions themselves, it will help orient you to be thinking about important topics and issues that you'll want to address. As we all know, there are times when you're trying to determine what product to use and you feel like you don't even know what questions to ask. Well, you now have a laundry list of questions that CFP Board has provided to help you think through those issues. The second sample questionnaire deals with common features and capabilities. And here we have approximately 70 questions that address features and capabilities used by numerous categories of technology. We'll talk about these in some additional detail as we move forward with the webinar. So obviously your relationship with the vendor is important. We talked about this a few minutes ago. We have a section with over 35 questions that looks at issues concerning reliability and usability, two very important topics for you, as well as what to be thinking about with that vendor relationship as you're working through and finding the right partner to help service you and the needs of your clients. So finally, we just finished talking about this a minute ago with the assumptions and outcomes. Again, more than 30 questions on this topic alone, looking at the assumptions that are embedded in software and how they might help you in developing reliable and objective and appropriate outcomes using the technology and providing services to your clients. We're not going to be able to go through every question today. I think the main takeaway that you should have in listening to this program is that there are resources available at CFP Board, that CFP Board has done a very careful and diligent job of identifying questions for you to think about as you're evaluating technology and thinking about what technology you would like to use, and that you can find this resource, it's available to you, and that this is a tool that you're able to use in thinking about not only complying with CFP Board's technology standard, but also how you can best use technology to serve your clients. With that, let me turn it over to Patrick, who's going to help us start walking through some of the questions that you'll find in these questionnaires.
Leo, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to start off with the first core financial planning technologies. And I've seen some of the questions, and some folks are wanting some real life examples. Others are having some very, very good questions with regards to some of the things that we've discussed. And today we're going to stay as high level as we can to get through everything, but just encourage you to continue asking the questions. We'll see what we can hopefully get to at the end. The core financial planning technologies, as we take a look at them on the next slide in a little bit more detail, you can see that CRM, financial planning, portfolio management, document management, and risk tolerance, these 5 tools have historically ranked high in the category of most valuable technology in surveys such as the T3 report. In fact, typically over the past few years, CRM, financial planning, portfolio management rank as 1, 2, and 3, respectively. Now, the goal of the sample questionnaires is to arm you with questions and thoughts on what to think about when it comes to your tech stack, as well as questions are a great way to build your conversation with any of your technology providers in each of these categories. So when it comes to the CRM piece, understanding the role of client management in your firm, where does CRM play a role? So for example, integration versus aggregation. There are some CRM systems that will export a lot of data. There are other CRM systems that are somewhat limited in what they will export, and all are in different states. And so just understanding where can my data reside? Is my CRM going to be my system of record? If it is, then it needs to meet your requirements of being that system of record. When it comes to reporting and compliance, CRM, is that going to be where, for example, emails are archived, or are those utilized in another software application for that? And as we talked about that system of record, is that where everyone's going to put all the information with regards to that client to then maybe pull out of as the primary component of the hub into financial planning or into portfolio management? So just a few things to consider. Again, financial planning, as Leo suggested, there's like 100 questions around financial planning, obviously this being the CFP board. But how comprehensive do you want to be? So I just want to take one angle and just ensuring that as you're taking a look at the tools, if your goal is to be comprehensive, then make sure the tool that you have is comprehensive. Most of the tools still have goal and cash flow based type of tools. But the one thing I'd like to point out is the specialized planning components. There's a lot of times, even in client user groups, Going back to the software utilization of 45 to 50%, we find clients that have been with us maybe for just a year, 18 months, and they're talking about, well, I might want to take a look at this solution, when in fact they could do that in the financial planning tool. So I want to call out some of the specialized planning components that are in your tools: tax planning, retirement planning, education, social security, estate planning, stock options, and there's probably a myriad of more. But just understanding that how far can you take the comprehensiveness that you want within your financial planning tool? Good questions to ask, and the questionnaire will help you on that. Portfolio management. Understand what you mean by portfolio management. So which robust features are right for you? Again, similar to financial planning and the specialized planning components, portfolio management has quite a bit of feature functionality in terms of account opening, portfolio construction, investment research, analytics, rebalancing, trading, reconciliation, client performance reporting, and that list probably goes on as well. So just making sure that it's the right tool for you, and not necessarily, it could be the most popular tool that's being sold today, but still make sure it's the right tool for your business processes. Document management, again, kind of straightforward with DocuSign and tools like that. But just again, what is it that you want this tool to do? There's more tools coming online similar to that. And as you see them, whether they're less expensive, whether they have a certain feature that you really want to lean into, make sure it fits within your process. And finally, risk tolerance. Watch out for redundant or repetitive tools that utilize some type of risk tolerance tool. For example, financial planning tools a lot of times will have risk assessments where they can, or risk score, if you will, where they can answer a few questions and get into a category of risk. So take a look. Are you wanting quiz versus score and assessment? More in-depth tools such as nitrogen. Just understand again, what is it that's going to best fit your technical ecosystem. Now, let's take a look at some of the common features and capabilities. Again, a lot of different features here, from data aggregation and all the way down to artificial intelligence. And I'm going to talk very high level about artificial intelligence. I'm sure we have a question coming on that where, as a group, we'll probably lean into being able to address some more details about that. But let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. And data aggregation being first, this was an interesting one, as there's a lot of research or history shows that this is a tool that advisors do want to utilize, but there's just not a lot of satisfaction in some of the existing tools and experiences that have been out there. But I just encourage you to give the providers their due. There's been a lot of improvement with regards to data aggregation. Things such as OAuth tokens and new technologies that can secure passwords for a little bit of an extended period of time. But you have to keep in mind, the bank, the credit union, the institution will always have control over their security protocols, and it's for their client safety. So the fact that something might break eventually or at some point in time is bound to happen, because the institutions are trying to do their best to safeguard their clients' data. So work with your clients, educate your clients on what data aggregation is and how it works, so they have an understanding and they don't get frustrated with you for trying to provide an easier way to get you data, especially on held away assets that you don't have access to. But have that conversation, but also take a look at the providers. There's some questions in there that will help you kind of discern who might be the best fit for yourself. As we take a look at the next category, third-party integration. Understand your flow. So back to the data, the process, and the advice, and be open to new ways of getting data. There are times that you may be looking at a solution and you're like, well, it doesn't integrate with this tool. So for example, let's say it doesn't integrate with Allbridge, but it integrates with your CRM, and all the data that comes through Allbridge eventually lands in your CRM. Well, then just integrate from CRM. It might be a change in the workflow, but if it doesn't hinder the process that you're trying to accomplish, it might be the right thing if it's the right technology. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Cloud computing. Again, this could be a very lengthy conversation, but just do your due diligence. Be prudent. Even basic questions. A lot of new providers that are out there, and even existing providers, we get asked all the time, where is your data? Is it secure? Do you have disaster recovery set up? If so, where is it? Is it, is all of my data inside the United States? So be prudent in understanding where the cloud is, how the cloud is put together. And there are things such as called the SOC reports or SOC audits that you can most certainly get from providers that go into a lot of detail, maybe more than you might want, but it is a great view and great insight into the company and who you're doing business with. All right, let's take a look at the next one, regulatory and legal compliance. Again, don't presume, ask the tough questions, and most of you know those questions to ask, but that's always got to be some type of insight that you have into the technology that you're utilizing. All right, next one, please. Client portals. Again, everyone has one, right? So which one is best for you in terms of functionality, but also which one's best for your client? Which one has the more appealing, possibly the more appealing aesthetics, better experience? Which one is able to concentrate more data? Maybe one has data aggregation and the other one does not. So again, and this is a situation where as an advisor, you've got your top tier clients that you've got your best relationships with. Sometimes it's okay to ask them questions. If you're thinking of changing your technology that might affect them, you might, not that they have to sit in on the demo, but you certainly may want to get their feedback. Take a look at the next item. Client reports. Do they help improve your client experience? Are they both maybe paper-based or PDF-based, but also are they digitally interactive? Again, this is directly affecting your client. So getting feedback on this, it may be all the detail that you want, but is it in a format that's digestible by your client? For example, I know a lot of planning reports, there's a lot of narrative for those people that want to dig in. There's graphic visuals for those that are more visually learning. And then there's worksheets where if you really want to dig in and see where numbers are coming from and going to, you've got that capability to provide that to the client. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Alerts or moderating tools. Now, setup is key for these, and these apply across your platform. They could be at the network level or they could be at the application level. But just as on your cell phone, you set up alerts and you get every alert that comes up and you just get very weary of looking at all the alerts. Same thing is true with this type of software. Make sure you're setting it up correctly so you're not spamming yourself, and then also making sure it's compliant. If something is monitoring, it has the ability to read your data potentially. So if that is the case, then you have to do some diligence, kind of going back to the cloud computing and where is that data being held? Is it secure? And asking those appropriate questions. Let's take a look at the next one. Billing support and payment processing. Just keep it simple. Is it flexible? Does it have the providers that you need to have in order to do the billing and the processing? Can it do ad hoc customized billing, quarterly, monthly? And does it have an archive so you can see history? And does it have either a portal or subscription manager that allows you to understand what have you done over a period of time? Let's take a look at the next one. Collaboration tools. This segment is going to change significantly over the next couple of years, especially with AI. And so the key is, does it truly improve your client experience? And we're going to see collaboration tools all the way from, obviously, like what we're on today. The platform we use today is Zoom, but there will be platforms out there that will allow you to engage your clients, that will have presentation software embedded, that will have artificial intelligence that will allow you to ask questions and subscribe the answers of the clients, allowing you to access your planning reports and pull them in. Accessing content kind of ad hoc on the fly that's appropriate for the client to review. So a lot of things coming down the pipe for collaboration tools. But again, don't go because it might be the shiny object towards that, but make sure it truly fits and improves your client experience. All right, next one, please. Artificial intelligence. Again, I'm sure we're going to get a question on this, but just at a high level, the hallucinations are real. So real life example, advisor was working towards putting together information for a seminar, more or less a workshop they're going to provide. And so they started taking a look at research data. And so they thought, I'm going to use AI. And they pulled up what they thought was really valid data. They were from very well-known providers. The metrics and the analysis seemed legitimate. And then when they went to try to find the sources on Google, nothing could be found. And so the hallucinations are real. So if you're preparing for a meeting and you decide to opt into a Chat GPT model or a Google model to get some questions, answers, or to provoke some thought-provoking questions, and you're looking at data, you have to ensure that it's accurate. Just double checking if it's something that needs to be sourced. But as much as the hallucinations are real, the ability to change the way you're going to do business in the future is also very real. But research the right questions to ask. And like I said, we'll probably be going through those. My guess is from a question we get from AI a little bit later. But for now, let's move on and get to the next questionnaire. Matt, take it over.
All right, great, Patrick. Thank you. Yes, the next questionnaire here on technology and vendor relationship. I will walk through this one with you. As we can see here, there's some great questions in all of these different areas, from reliability to free trial periods, user interface, usability and controls, how to configure the technology, technical and training support that's available for those who buy the new technology, and finally, terms and conditions of the technology vendor agreement. If we move to the next slide, obviously time doesn't permit, as Leo mentioned earlier, walking through all of these. So what I'm going to do is cherry pick a couple that I think it might make sense to go just a little bit deeper on. And the first item from this questionnaire I'll highlight is in the reliability section of the questionnaire. And that is, when you think about the long-term reliability of new technology, what processes and mechanisms do you have that will allow for direct user feedback? This feedback could be in relation to enhancements you'd like to see built into the technology. It could be feedback around what you believe to be bugs in the software. It could be feedback around the timing of a planned outage. In the ideal world, vendors would appreciate and encourage all types of feedback and have already defined processes to gather and respond to feedback. Or they may even have, as I think was mentioned earlier, forums like user groups to specifically solicit customer feedback on a wide range of topics. At the end of the day, I think it's important to an advisor's overall satisfaction with their technology choice to understand how they can provide that feedback and get that back and forth going with the vendor to get the answers to their questions and their concerns. The next sample question I'll touch on is, does the technology provide an administrator account or different user types with varying levels of access to certain functions? And I'm sorry, it looks like we skipped ahead. All of these are on this one slide. And this question is particularly important if you're making a technology decision and choice, not just for yourself, but for others within your office or firm. We all know that practices have evolved and often go beyond a sole practitioner model. And by definition, technology has had to adjust and adapt and evolve as well. And technology vendors in some cases have built different user types into their technology and attached features and capabilities to those user types based on the unique needs. So examples of user types that could exist out there as you're evaluating technology might include a manager user who's able to provide access to new users, restrict access to certain functionality, or track usage across their firm. Another one might be a compliance user who's maybe only entitled to view data and or to approve presentations before they're released to end clients. A third one might be a support user who cannot really create new clients in the technology, but who work in support of particular advisors or particular end clients. And one other example I'll throw out there is an investment specialist type user who's given the ability maybe to define certain capital market assumptions or build model portfolios that then flow down to other users on the platform in their office who may not be allowed to create these kinds of things on their own. Oftentimes, the ability to provide access to a broad set of users with a targeted set of features, it's not always evident in standard marketing materials as you're thinking about onboarding some new technology. So I think the higher priced your buying decision is, the more important it is for advisors to inquire about these type of user accesses to see how they might streamline some workflows. The next section I'll jump into here is of the questionnaire is around configuration. And there's several good questions for you all to consider. And I guess what I wanted to do was call out for everyone the distinction between configuration and customization, because we found that many advisors use the terms interchangeably, despite them being importantly distinct. So let's talk a little bit about the difference. First, configuration refers to the adjusting of technology, to users' needs based on selecting from a pre-programmed set of options. So an example of that might be the inclusion of your firm's tried and true risk tolerance questionnaire, as opposed to using the default questionnaire that might come with the technology, but may not be aligned with how your firm approaches that aspect of the financial planning process. So that's configuring the software to meet your needs. And if we contrast that with customization, which refers to more of the wholesale modification of the technology beyond its default and out-of-the-box capabilities. This is done oftentimes to meet the unique business needs of an organization or group. So an example here could be something like a firm requesting some custom reporting. In this example, a firm might be looking to adopt some new technology that produces reporting that's used in client meetings and presentations, but after reviewing the technology, the advisor or firm determines that that out-of-the-box reporting falls short. So the advisor or firm could look to have a customized report or two built into their version of the technology based on the needs they have. So as you're making technology choices for yourself and for others, and you're going through that due diligence, it's important to make sure you come away with an understanding of what comes standard, what can be configured to meet some of your unique needs, and what's the process and cost that would be associated with customizing the technology when and if that becomes something that you want to consider. And I think we're running up on time here, so I'm going to jump past the fourth one here and pass it to Dain for his last section.
Thanks, Matt. So the last item or the last questionnaire here has to do with assumptions and outcomes. And that includes questions around assumptions and common assumptions, as well as the assessment, of questions around how a software assesses different outcomes. And for me, this questionnaire is really valuable in helping you inventory the different assumptions that you should be thinking about when you're evaluating software. In addition to understanding those basic assumptions that go into the projections, it's also important to understand which items are or are not factored into the software's calculations. For example, are retirement healthcare costs factoring in IRMA adjustments for Medicare? If not, that's something that you may need to either mentally or manually adjust for when considering the outcomes and presenting those to clients. It's also helpful to remember that different assumptions and factors will have different impacts depending on your client's situation. I'll skip ahead a couple slides to the last item that we're going to review. We can go ahead one more here, which is the technology evaluation checklist. So this checklist is designed as a reference point that you can use when you're evaluating or reevaluating your technology platform, or when you're researching specific software solutions. And then the last slide here, you can see some of the considerations that go into the checklist. In my mind, maybe the most important thing that the checklist helps you remember is that you're not going to have a successful technology platform if you don't start by understanding your needs and your clients' needs. For example, if you're working with high net worth clients, you might want to ensure that the platform covers very specific and detailed estate planning assumptions. The checklist also provides a good reminder that it's important to understand how your technology platforms work with each other. I think Patrick covered this earlier, but consider how the flow of data, the flow of how data is input into the platform, how it can move between different platforms. And you also would want to consider what portions of the platform that you expect your clients to interact with, and how that might impact the choices that you make. I'd say one last thing to remember with the checklist is that not everything is going to be relevant to your situation. So it's best not to treat it as a requirements list, but a way of understanding what's important to you and your business and how that's being addressed by your technology providers.
Thank you, Dain. And with that, our presentation is concluded. I'd like to thank all of you for attending. I'd like to give a hand to our industry panelists for helping present. And I'd like to encourage everyone to go download the guide and questionnaires and review them. This presentation was an overview of the in-depth wealth of information contained in those materials. You can locate them at cfp.net/tech guide. So thank you again and have a wonderful day.